Greetings, Santa Rosa, center of the universe. I bring you greetings from the other center of the universe, the spiritual Center for Spiritual Living in San Jose. Well, with you and with us, we've got like the bay covered, right? You protect the north, we'll protect the south. So our topic today is when you feel like crying, and I'm not sure why they get that to me, but when you feel like crying. And as I was reflecting on the topic, I was reflecting on my experience with you. Has it been 20 years? I can hardly believe it. How is it that I haven't aged? Oh man, moisturize. Oh, I've aged. Haven't we aged? Do not put pictures of me from the Throwback Thursdays. It's got to be the worst thing that ever happened, ever. 20 years ago. Aging is fascinating, isn't it? Yeah, it's better than the alternative. But I remember it wasn't that long ago. I was driving my car and I was looking at my hands on the steering wheel and I had this revelation. It's like, these are my dad's hands. Like, when did that happen? And it's a funny thing that the universe does, that it causes our eyesight to soften such that we can't see really close, but then we need to see close, like to pluck our eyebrows or our nose hairs. Can we talk about that here? I know, I'm so glad to be here today. It's probably my last time ever being invited to speak at your center. Oh, wow. I remember, so our topic is, I'm going to stay on topic. Our topic is when you feel like crying. And who hasn't? I had a particularly profound crying bout in my life. I mean, there's been a lot of them, but some of them really stand out because it's from those bouts of crying, those moments of discontent and maybe even despair. It's from the very bottom of the bottom that anything is possible. But often we don't get to that field where anything is possible until whatever it is that is not happening is finally released from us, you know. I can't be what I'm called to be while I continue to attach myself to what I'm not. So it was March 11, 1994. I remember it vividly. It was actually the installation of Dr. Edward Viljoen as the senior minister of the what was then called the Church of Religious Science Santa Rosa, or the Santa Rosa Church of Religious Science. And this community was actually having Sunday services at the Luther Burbank Center. And I remember it being this massive auditorium with a big black stage, and I had come to visit. I was invited to participate in Edward. He wasn't Dr. Edward back then. He was Reverend, the Emperor of the Universe. I love it when he's not here, because we can talk about him like he's not here. You talk about him anyway. And I was sitting on the stage at that service, and I was so moved by what was taking place, but mostly what was happening for me. I was feeling already a deep sense of loss, because you had won his heart. You know, you had lured him away from our Los Angeles, and Santa Rosa and Burbank were very far from each other. So while I was sitting on the stage, I was crying and crying. And I thought it was because I was beginning already the process that I knew would be lengthy of missing my friend. But it wasn't until I was on my way home to Los Angeles that I had a revelation that I wasn't so much just sad about being away from my friend. I was experiencing envy, like deep, profound envy. I was having a revelation that couldn't even be articulated. I couldn't even speak its name. But I was looking at you, or the incarnation of you back then, and I was actually wondering, would I ever be so blessed? Would I ever be so fortunate? Would I ever have the size of trouble he's about to have? So San Jose keeps reminding me, David, we need to pray for bigger problems, because it's only through our problems that God will generate transformation. Transformation is almost never generated out of good times. Transformation occurs when we need it. And God doesn't step in finally and give us what it is that we think is missing. But what really happens when we need it is something is generated from within us, something inside. That's how God is generated, and solution is born. And so through my mini, very gay meltdown on your, I can say gay here, right? I'm sorry, I'm out. Some of you, thank God, I thought you didn't know. Some of you are first-timers here, right? Welcome. It was through that meltdown that my next stage of development was born. And what was occurring in that moment, what was occurring was a surrender of my hunger to be it, do it, express it, experience it, like Edward and the Santa Rosa Church of Religious Science and the Luther Burbank Center and the Stepping Stones bookstore, to be able to realize that just ain't me, which began a softening and an opening and a revealing of what became possible, and then a courting of San Jose, and then I actually still get weepy. I'm so in love with them, I can hardly stand it, and thank God I didn't land here. Do you know what I mean by that? That was a left-handed compliment, I think my mother would have said. So, when you feel like crying, the book of the month that you have established this month is called The Healing Power of Humor. And I bought the book, and I read most of it. It's an extraordinary book, and I urge you to get it. You can get it at the bookstore. And part 2 of the book is actually 108 pages, and part 2 is called When You Feel Like Crying. And throughout these 108 pages are 14 techniques that you can use when you feel like crying in whatever development or stage you are in your life. 14 stages or steps or techniques that you can use to propel you forward, to lift you, sweeten you. And those 108 pages are pretty self-clarifying, so I don't need to go through those with you. Let me just tell you what I do when I feel like crying. When I feel like crying, what I do is I immerse myself in my community. It's one of the things I love about Santa Rosa. It's one of the things I love about you. You are clearly a community. And it's one of the things I love about the Center for Spiritual Living San Jose. It is a community. It's not a rock star driven, although I miss that period. That causes me to cry once in a while. It is a community of folks who care about one another such that they take a stand for one another. And even if you're here for the first time, you are now part of this community. Even if you never come back to visit again, you will have been impacted by this community, and you will have made an impact on it. Viktor Frankl, he is known to have coined a phrase, Sunday neuroses. And Sunday neuroses is what happens for a lot of folks on the weekends when they experience apathy or boredom or discontent. And the reason apathy and boredom and discontent can happen on a Sunday or on the weekend when you're away from work is because most of your life is invested in your work. You invest most of your time and your energy and your lifeblood in your work. We spend so much time making a living that we forget to make a life. So that when it comes to the weekend, we don't really know who we are. Because who you are really is who you are at work, or who you are searching for work, or who you were when you had work. And this Sunday neuroses is one of the most beautiful opportunities for the thing itself to make itself known in your life. And it will make itself known in your life if you begin to reach out to community for your needs, your hopes, and your aspirations. You reach out to community so you can lend your time and your talent and your treasure. But what often happens instead, though, people don't reach out to community. What they start reaching out to is Match.com, plentyoffish.com, which is fine. It's a fantastic place. However, have any of you ever dated? Have you ever been on a date ever in your life? that frequently leads to marriage or long-term relationships. Sometimes it doesn't even meet the dating. It's like you meet and then you live together the next day. What's unfortunate, mostly for me, I've discovered, I look back at all of my past relationships, all of them, and there is a common thread. There is one thread common to all of my past relationships. It was pretty much this: I looked to my ex-spouses. I looked to them to provide for me attention and nurturance and time and participation and help and patience and forgiveness, and they were supposed to do it all the time, 24/7, without question. And they're supposed to have very little needs, never supposed to be crabby, cranky, always supposed to be beautiful, six-pack abs, and cheerful. And then I watch in my 20-something years of ministry how often relationships fail. They fail over and over again. People get divorced and they separate and they dissolve their relationship. Not that they really had much of a relationship, because what usually happens is we go from dating, which is really the courtship. You want to woo them. Do you remember dating? Where you would do anything. You even waxed and brushed your hair and can we talk real? And then you get married. And then you move from dating and trying to make an impact with the person you're trying to lure. Now you've caught them. Like, the hunt is over. Let the feast begin. I know, isn't it so? Yeah, we're preaching today, by the way. So then what happens is you never even really are in the marriage. You go straight from dating to the business of the marriage. The marriage never had a chance because you never tried it on. Mostly we go straight to the business of the marriage. And the business of the marriage is like, who's going to pick up the kids? Who's going to change the address with the post office? Who's going to take care of your mother that she's got signs of dementia? That's the business of the marriage. But the marriage really never happens. The marriage is the true possibility and the potential for the thing itself to be revealed. But it's not being revealed because you really aren't invested in the marriage, but the business of the marriage, and then you give up. And the room got quiet. So here's what I suggest. If you're on plentyoffish.com and match.com, fantastic. But don't seek those people to be everything for you. It will never work. It's unfair. Instead, lean on your community for those things. When you feel like crying, reach out to your community. Let your community handle different aspects of your life, but also be part of your community. Make an impact. Don't just be like a spectator in the stands of your community. Don't just come here like it's the drive-through. You're going to drive through and have the church drop some happiness in your life, and then you go consume it, and then you come back when you're hungry again. Participate in your community. That's how we move away from the Sunday neuroses. That's how we know what to do when we feel like crying. The first place we turn is to our community. And then when you're married or coupled, or you refresh your marriage or your coupledom, that becomes part of your community too. But your spouse has now a chance. They have a fighting chance because you're not seeking them to be everything. They can just be what they are, which is a magnificent position of possibility. So that's what I do when I feel like crying. Firstly, I cry. And I cry, and I cry, and I cry, like snotty cry, ugly cry, like you make sounds like a wounded animal, like your neighbors would be worried. I want you to cry like that. And then when you're done, you're done. And then when we're that done, like, well, you got like a hiccup, so you're and you're all like puffy, and then you know who your real friends are. Because they're not scared, they're still there. And they're telling you now, clean it up. But then we move from that place, and then we become people like Viktor Frankl led us to believe we could be, which is that we can be absolutely free in any situation. When I feel like crying, I've learned to actually yearn for God, but I yearn for God in a new way. I used to look at God as like father, mother, and that was a big improvement over God looking like Zeus. God was white, Catholic, beard like Dumbledore or Santa Claus or Gandalf. Did you ever notice it's interesting? It's always the same man. Kathy Ann Lewis tells us that believing in God as Father and Mother is a beautiful place to start and a lousy place to stop. Because the problem with God as Father and Mother, the problem with it is I always have a relationship with it as a parent, which makes me always a child. I'm always needy. I'm always in trouble. I'm always making mistakes and errands and making God unhappy or disappointment or putting God at risk. You know, those images, those human images cannot not be overlaid. But Kathy Ann said, rather, start yearning for God as you would a lover. And I thought, Kathy Ann, that's kind of creepy. and Kathy Ann just sort of gives me that look like, what have you been smoking, David? So yearn for God. When I feel like crying now, I have learned to start yearning for God like I would yearn for my beloved. And then what happens is a mutual chase has begun. You start chasing it. And then you notice it's always been chasing you. I went to a Passover Seder for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and it was marvelous. I was invited by a group of 16 people, 8 couples. There were 8 couples that had been friends for 40 years. They raised their children together, and now they're together raising their grandchildren. And they've been having Passover Seders for 40 years. And they invited my partner, Mauricio Lopez Oquizan, who's Mexican, if you couldn't tell. Mauricio and I were invited. So here's the 2 goys, the 2 non-Jews. There's 18 of us at this big table, and 16 of them have been together for 40 years, and the Passover Seder is really called a night of questions, which was perfect, because I oftentimes am like Hermione Granger in the Harry Potter series, because something will happen, and I want to know. And so when one of the ceremonial pieces of the Seder would take place, they would look at us, and I'd say, yes, I have a question, and I would ask a question, and did I tell you they were New York Jews? The best kind of Jews, because they're colorful. And one of them would give me the answer. Well, this is why we do it. It happens like this. And someone would go, yeah, but that's not exactly right. The reason why we do it is this, and then we do it this. And then someone else going, yeah, well, that's fine. You've been saying that for 40 years. What's really going on is this. It was the most beautiful night of my life. During this Seder, though, there's a ceremony that's stunning. It's called finding the Afikomen. A matzah is an unleavened cracker that's used as part of the ceremony. It's about this big. It's like 12 by 12. It's a size, taste, and texture of a floor tile. And they begin the Seder with 3 of them stacked next to each other in a silk satin envelope. And at the beginning of the Seder, they pull out the middle matzah, and they break off half of it. And they put it aside. They push down the rest of the middle matzah and put that aside. They take this, which is now called the Afikomen, and they wrap it in a beautiful napkin. The kids all close their eyes, and then an adult hides the Afikomen. And for the rest of the Seder, the children try to find the Afikomen. And what's beautiful is you're watching these adults in the other room, watching the kids as the kids are tearing through the living room, pulling up the cushions and the cupboards and drawers and boxes and cupboards and garage and running in the backyard. The adults in the other room are yelling, closer, closer. No, you're cold, cold, colder, hot, hot, hot. And I was reflecting as I'm watching this, how beautiful. This is what community does. Community hollers guidance and assistance while you're looking for what's missing. But we don't always find what's lost. We don't always find what's missing. But I was watching these kids looking for the Afikomen, and I found great comfort in that, because really, it's not the finding of the Afikomen that really matters, it's the hunt. It's not really like finding the relationship that really matters, it's the hunt. Not really finding the cure, but the hunt that really matters. And when you're looking, or when you're on the hunt, yearning for God, then you can go from whatever's causing you to cry into absolute transformation. Benjamin Zander is his name. Benjamin Zander. He's a British conductor. I watched about a 20-minute TED video. You should check this out later. TED, it's a TED Talk. Benjamin Zander. He's a British conductor. He's like He's manic. He's like me. If I were straight and British, I would be Benjamin Zander. Oh, and talented. If I were straight and British and talented. And wise. If I was straight and British and talented and wise. Okay, so I'm not Benjamin Zander. But Benjamin Zander has an extraordinary experience, working relationship with his orchestra. But his orchestra has gone from really good to great. You know, kind of like Chris Fritchie and Randall and Paul and Steve. Every time I come here, they're just better and better and better. Thank you, Chris. Benjamin Zander said he had this revelation once, that on his CD, he's always the one on the CD, but he's the only one in the orchestra who doesn't make a sound. I mean, he said, I'm on the cover, and I'm just like, but I'm not making a sound. And he said this revelation transformed him because he realized that he requires as his power to make other people powerful. He realizes that his power comes from making other people powerful. And that revelation alone transformed the orchestras with whom he worked. And his orchestras had this awareness too, and they said, Benjamin, something's different. What is it? And he told them that he's aware that the only power he has is to make them powerful. So when I feel like crying, that's one of my goals now. How can I make other people powerful? And you might wonder, what's the measure? How will I know other people are powerful? Benjamin Zander says, you will see it because their eyes will be shining. So he's always looking and see people's eyes are shining. And if they're not shining, he's not asking, so what's the matter with you? Your eyes aren't shining. Well, he's British, not Jewish. What's the matter with you that your eyes are not shining? He doesn't ask that question. He asks himself, who am I being that my orchestra's eyes are not shining? Who am I being that my children's eyes are not shining? Sometimes who we're being is a person who's careless with our words or our language. And it's a call right now. We're called to be really clear on how we're using language in the presence of not just other people, but in presence of the one for whom you yearn. Your language matters. In that same 20-minute TED Talk, Benjamin Zander tells of a woman who survived Auschwitz. He met her. He said he was touched and moved and inspired by this particular woman. She described to Benjamin how when she was 15 years old, on the train, headed to Auschwitz, 15 years old, sitting next to her 8-year-old brother. Their parents had already disappeared. They didn't know what was happening, or they didn't know to where it was they were headed. And she looked down as a 15-year-old at her brother, 8-year-old brother's bare feet. Where are your shoes? He said, I lost them. And she started yelling, how could you be so stupid? Why do you always leave your shoes laying around? Why can't you find your stuff? You know, the kind of stuff that an older sister would say to a younger brother. But it's the last thing she ever said to him. They arrived very soon thereafter. They were separated, and he died in the camps. But she emerged. And she said, I walked out of Auschwitz and into life. And I made a vow that I will never say anything that couldn't stand as the last thing I ever say. Now, can we do that? I'm not so sure that I can do that, but and I'll probably make myself wrong for trying. But it's a possibility to live into. Every day is a new opportunity for me to live into that new possibility. And that possibility for me is stunning. I'm grateful that I don't have so much envy for all of you now. I just have a great respect and admiration. And you do some things that are really, really well. Like I love the fact that this morning your board president, Teresa, was in service. Like like finding me tissue and hand cream, and I thought, I can't wait to tell my board president what your board president is doing. And I really want to ask you, what's up with Sonoma County? Because when I sat down this morning, there's a half a dozen eggs sitting on the chair. Why do you have eggs sitting in a carton on your, just because it's Sonoma County? Hey, they're all like, what's the problem? I love this place, and I love you. And thank you for giving me the time and this opportunity to share with you and to explore with you. I'm very grateful for the example that you've set. I'm fairly certain that the thriving that is the Center for Spiritual Living San Jose is in great part due to the example that you set here in Sonoma County, and I'm grateful. Let's pray together, shall we? Move into prayer pose, whatever that means for you. For me, prayer pose simply means that I stop whatever it is I'm doing and I reenact almost that same 2 minutes of silence that's here in this service every Sunday at the beginning, where the silence is thundering, where it's so quiet that I began to hear the celestial song. And I know that the celestial song is a song for which only my soul has ears to hear. And right now my soul is hearing the celestial song, and I'm speaking my word for this community. I'm speaking my word. This is my commitment. I promise in the presence of this God for which I yearn to move through this world today in such a way that I'm making an impact, that when I have felt like crying, it continues to transform me such that I'm greater because of it, stronger because of it, softer and sweeter because of it, which allows me to be in the presence of anyone at any time, because I no longer will forget that I'm in the presence of a mighty power to which everything is possible. And there's nothing else to do but to get on with it, because this really is the best day ever. And so it is.